Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, my quarter century in the knife business. Yep, so we're a quarter of a century into the new century, as I like to think of it, but it's not really that new anymore. I got started right at the beginning of this century, about the year 2000, and so a couple weeks ago I did a video that sort of talked about some of the changes over that quarter century in the knife business. Today I'm going to talk about more of my own personal experiences, just some of my reflections on, spending 25 years in this business. I've dug up a bunch of old pictures and videos of me back in the early days when I still had some hair, so I'll sprinkle those throughout the video. First, however, let me mention that every year I try to do a viewer knives video. So this year kind of got started on it a little belatedly. So I just want to solicit you guys to send pictures to me for that viewer knives video. Basically, just a representation of what your best work has been over the course of this past year. I put them all together and show off what the viewers of this channel have been up to this year. So let me just start out by kind of giving the story of my own little journey through the knife business. Some of you guys may have heard some of this before, but many of you probably haven't. So I'll tell just kind of the whole story of, what I've done in the knife world and how I got started. So I started my career as a writer. I ultimately published, 30, 35 novels, most of them in the mystery and thriller realm. So, that's where I started my career. And I was also a big martial arts enthusiast. Again, I probably did that for, depending on how you do the math, 25, 35 years, all told. And so I was really into, Japanese swords and Japanese martial arts. And so at one point I was going to do this, I was going to write a book that was going to have a main character who was a swordsmith. And the basic premise of the novel was, here's this guy, sort of an ex-military guy who chucks his military career and goes off into the boonies and starts making Japanese swords. Then he gets pulled back into some big adventure. So anyway, I figured that as part of this project of writing this book about this swordsmith, I needed to get my hands on something tangible that would give me a sense of how this guy felt, what his life was really like. So I bought this little piece of metal, not this one, but it was about this size, just a little piece of mild steel. I cut off a big, long piece of steel. And I held onto it with a pair of vice grips, and I heated it up with a propane torch. So I took a hammer and I whacked on it on a rock, and I could feel the steel move just the tiniest little bit. And anybody who's done this knows just how intoxicating that feeling can be. And it just got its hooks in me, and I've been doing this ever since. So anyway, that all led me to start making Japanese swords. I got an anvil and a forge and started going after it. I quickly realized, my ambition at the time was to make a Japanese sword, and I quickly realized that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I didn't have any metallurgical training or background in fabrication or anything. I knew absolutely nothing. Real quick here, guys, if you've been enjoying all the free content I've been offering on YouTube for the past 15 years and you want to give back to the channel, there's a way. It's called Patreon. All my Patreon supporters at any pledge level get plans to most of my builds, plus other bonuses for higher pledge levels, plus you get the good feeling of helping out the channel. So help us, help you. Link in the cards and description. Thanks, and now back to work. So I had to kind of go backwards, start making knives, just simple little knives, and experimenting and trying all this different stuff to get hamones, the characteristic little temper line that is in all Japanese blades. And, you know, I started getting better. And so at a certain point, I wanted to get a hydraulic forge press. I was stony broke at the time. My wife was sick, she wasn't working, and, you know, it was bad time financially. And so I put up a website and marketed my swords, and I was able to sell a bunch of them fairly quickly. I was actually kind of surprised. And I stupidly took a bunch of orders for swords that I just dramatically underpriced, and that ended up hanging over my head for a very long time. But anyway, I did get enough money to buy a forge press. I keep pointing over here because that's where mine's located. And still got the same one 20 odd years later, whatever it's been. So anyway, started making Japanese swords, and essentially what happened was I would write in the morning, I'd work until, you know, 1 in the afternoon or something, take a break, and then work in the afternoon making knives. And it was not at all unusual in the early days there to end up working until midnight. And I sort of went into this period where I basically had 2 full-time jobs. You know, I was writing, it wasn't, you know, 9 to 5, but it was a very intense and occupying kind of job. And then in whatever other time that I had, I was making knives and making swords. So basically I went into a period of 10, 12, 15 years there where I was just working or going to my kids' baseball games. That's basically all I did. And so at a certain point, and this would have been 10-ish years ago, I just said, I can't do this anymore. I just, you know, it was just wearing me out. And my wife had, you know, gone through her period of being sick. She was back at work, and, you know, our financial situation had cleared up a little bit. And so it was possible for me to say, okay, I don't need every single piece of money I can pick up off the ground. Let me focus on either the writing or the sword making, or the, you know, whatever you want to call this, knife making. And so at that point, I wasn't really happy with how things were going with my writing. I won't get into that. But anyway, I just said, okay, it's time to focus on making knives. And that's what's brought me here today. Now, at the time, I was working in a little garage shop behind my house, and it was very cramped, just to say the least. At a certain point in there, I realized that making Japanese swords, as much as I loved it, and I love it to this day, as a business proposition, it's terrible. It's just very hard to realize the amount of labor. It takes hundreds and hundreds of hours to make a sword. And to get that money back out of the sword it was really, really hard to do. There are just not that many people who want to spend $20,000 on a sword. So with that in mind, I decided that I wanted to go more towards making just knives, straight stock removal type knives. And so, you know, I was doing martial arts, I was doing a lot of tactical shooting kind of stuff. I was part of this community of people at that point who, you know, were the kind of people who would carry tactical knives and stuff. And so I started going in this direction towards establishing Tactics Armory, which is tactical and outdoor type knives. And so that was how Tactics Armory started. And I'm going to circle back to that in a minute because I want to talk about the video part of my life. When I first got started, pretty rapidly, I started making pretty cool Hamones. You know, I knew that I wanted to do the kind of stuff that you saw in Japanese swords, but figuring out how to translate that into modern steel, you know, it wasn't completely obvious. And so I worked a lot on that and eventually started coming up with some things that were working. And people started kind of noticing this, and, you know, I would post things on forums showing some of the knives that I was making and stuff. And so I started getting all these emails from people who were saying, hey, tell me how you make your Hamones. And so I would type this big, long, hairy email saying, oh yeah, here's how I did it. Well, the problem was that I started just having to repeat this big long email time and time again, and it got to be quite a burden. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna make a video. Now this is before you could use cameras like I've got here, still cameras that also take videos. You had to get a separate video cam. So, you know, I went out and I bought a video cam, and I did this little video about making jamones. And I thought it was gonna be about 10 minutes long, but being the sort of obsessive type that I am, I was like, oh, this has gotta be better, this has gotta be better. It ends up being a lot longer and more detailed than I had originally intended. What I originally intended was just something very short and compact that I could sell basically for the price of shipping, and ended up with this video that was a lot longer and more detailed than I intended. And so, you know, I was like, selling this for $10 seems a little like it's underpricing it. So I forget exactly how much I started asking for it, but it was a little more than that. And so, you know, I started selling this video, and then I started, you know, people were interested in it, and so then I started doing some more videos about other aspects of the craft of Japanese swords. After I'd kind of gone through that whole process, and, you know, I'm putting all these little DVDs in boxes and, you know, sending them through the mail to people. So anyway, at a certain point, around 2010, people started talking about this thing, YouTube. I was like, you know, let me check out this YouTube thing. So I went and I looked, and I saw all these videos about all kinds of interesting stuff, and I was like, hey, maybe I could use this to help sell my little Japanese sword videos. So I did like a 2-minute excerpt from one of these videos. I think I had my wife do the voiceover for it, and posted it on there, and, you know, waited for the orders to flood in. Well, they didn't, and I kind of forgot about it. So, you know, 3-4 months go by, and I go back to YouTube. I was like, you know, I should check at least and see if like anybody's even watched this video. Well, come to find out, you know, 500,000, 250,000 people, I don't know, there was a lot of views. And I was like, huh, all these people are watching this video, but they're not buying the DVD. So there's something happening here that doesn't really have anything to do with these DVDs. I wonder if there's something in it for me. And really, just because it was kind of interesting to me, I started making videos about knife making, and here it is 15 years later, still making videos. And, you know, you can still get those videos, the original Japanese sword videos. I still sell those. I sell them in DVD form if you want them, or, you know, most people just stream them off my website, waltersorrellsblades.com. But anyway, so circling back to Tactics Armory and making modern style knives, essentially what happened was, gosh, I don't even remember exactly when this was. It probably was 15 years ago or something, because I remember my kid was like 12 years old or something at the time. He's 25 now. And he actually came up with the name Tactics Armory at, you know, at age 12 or whatever. Anyway, the idea was that I wanted to make these sort of tactical and you know, hunting knives and stuff like that. And so I started, you know, designing a little set of knives, and I started making them, and, you know, it was lots and lots of time at the grinder. And I was like, you know, I'm not getting any younger. If this is going to be something that is going to last as a job for me, I don't really want to be spending 40 hours a week standing in front of a belt grinder. I might as well work at the Ford factory or something, you know? So I kind of backburnered it for a little while. But then on YouTube, of course, at a certain point I saw that there were these CNC machines that were, you know, priced at a level that a normal mortal could actually afford one. And so I bought my first CNC machine, which is this Tormach back here. And I started using that as the basis for production of the Tactics Armory knives. Now, at the time, we were still living in a different town, more suburban kind of area. And I was actually working in my 2-car garage, and, you know, I hired a guy to help me out on CNC machine, and we're tripping all over each other, and I got stuff hanging from chain hoists, you know, pieces of machinery and stuff hidden behind other machines. It was just kind of a nightmare. And so you know, my kid was in college and stuff, and it just wasn't a convenient time for us to move. But ultimately, we were able to move, and so now I'm in this much bigger space and looking to expand a little bit. And really, oddly enough, 25 years in, I'm you know, at a point where I'm starting to kind of change my whole business model a little bit. So that sort of takes me to where I am today. So the next part of my little 25 years in knife making will be to sort of draw some lessons from my own twisting and turning path through this trade, craft, business, whatever it is you want to call it. So the first lesson, such as it is, that you might draw from what I've done is patience. You know, if I had set out into this thinking that I was going to get to the finish line, whatever the finish line might be, in a year or 2 or 6 months or whatever it might be, I would have long ago bailed out of this trade and started doing something else. It's not that you can't get rewards out of this craft, financial, psychological, whatever, but they don't tend to come very fast. I'm not saying it's impossible for somebody to learn how to do this pretty fast, get good at it pretty fast, and maybe, you know, start a business or whatever. But it's hard. It takes a certain kind of personality that has, you know, a lot of different abilities. You got to be able to sell. You got to be able to manage people. You got to be good at the craft itself in order to pull that off. And most people don't have all of those qualities. And even if you just look at this as a hobby, there's a lot to learn. There's woodworking, there's metalworking, there's ferrous metallurgy, there's non-ferrous metallurgy, there's, you know, all kinds of weird materials. There's a machining side to this. There's the physical skill of getting better at belt grinding. There's the skill of using hammers and anvils. It just takes time to get good at this stuff. And if you expect to be a master in a short period of time, you will be disappointed. So along with that, I would say be flexible. You know, you may go in thinking, as I did, you know, I thought I'm just going to make Japanese swords, that's going to be my thing, and that's that. But at a certain point, I just realized, like, this is not the path that entirely makes sense for me. As much as I love this part and this part, and, you know, the money side of making Japanese swords just wasn't working for me. And so I decided I gotta go in a different direction. And that's part of the fun of it, really, for me, is always being willing to, I mean, you wanna stick to a path. You don't wanna just be running willy-nilly all over the place, but at the same time, you know, it's like the old Bruce Lee thing that the rock is never as powerful as the water. Just go around things. Sometimes going around obstacles is the most important thing instead of smashing into them. Another important thing, and you know, if you pursue this as a hobby, then it's sort of obvious, but if you pursue it as, you know, as a money-making thing or maybe, you know, a side hustle or whatever, just be aware that the work is pretty hard. It's physically demanding. And so you need to be passionate about it. You need to be in it for the fun and the learning and the, you know, the new things and the comradeship that you might have with other knife, but whatever it is that draws you to the experience, be passionate about that. And if money comes later, that's great, but if you come right out of the gate hoping that money is going to be the thing, you're probably going to be doing something else in 3-4 years. Now, this is just me. You know, I don't say that this is important to everybody, but this is an artistic pursuit. And there are some kinds of people who want to pursue artistic things so that they can tell people that they do this cool thing. That is not practicing an art. You know, to practice an art is about showing up each and every day and doing something. And, you know, to keep yourself in that process, you want to be getting better and better. So, brief story, I've got a buddy who has a somebody related to him who's married to this guy who has been a musician, quote unquote, for many, many, many years. And my friend says, every time I get together with this guy, he plays the same chords. He's no better. He's still a terrible guitar player. He can't keep rhythm. He doesn't get any better. And he keeps doing this year after year, and he keeps telling people, I'm a musician, but he doesn't get any better. If you want to dignify yourself with saying, hey, I'm a this or that, this is my approach to the world anyway, then you should be trying to get better. You're never going to be, there's no top of the mountain. There's no point at which you have perfected it. But there's that everyday struggle to get better so that when you look over your shoulder and see what you did yesterday, it's not as good as what you did today. And when you look forward, it's always going to be better. To psychologically juggle this, you have to be able to be self-critical, to, pick up your knife and say, that is not as good as I want it to be. But you can't allow that mistake that you made or, something about this knife that's not perfection to stop you from making the next knife. A lot of people get defeated because they make something and it has a flaw. I don't know a single knife maker who doesn't make a knife that they can pick up and say, I want to do better at this. I want to do better at this. But at a certain point, they finish the blade or whatever, and they sell it or hang it on the wall or whatever, but they move on to the next thing. If you can't be self-critical and yet be resilient enough and enthusiastic enough about your future production that you don't start that next thing and finish this one, it's impossible to really progress in an art. You just sit there, much like this musician that my friend's acquainted with. All right, so final point. I was going to make a few points about doing this as a business, but I'm going to skip that and put that into some other video. The last point is, and it kind of comes out in everything that I've said before, always have a learning mindset. In the Japanese arts tradition, they like to talk about, in martial arts too, they like to talk about that there's a sort of circle of mastery. You start here as a white belt or a novice or an apprentice or whatever who knows nothing, and you learn all this stuff and you circle back around, and by the time you become a master, your eyes are always open. The world is always fresh to you because you're always seeing new things that you can learn and new areas to draw from. The point being that, again, there's no top to the mountain. There's only the trip up the mountain. And so as long as you keep everything fresh and keep learning, and like every time I go to the blade show, I'm always asking people, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? People kind of assume because I'm on YouTube that I know everything there is to know about knives. Not even close. I'm always trying to learn. I have a relationship with the guys at Pop's Knife Supply. I go out to their place all the time. They got all their stuff they sell. And I'm always picking things up that I've never even seen before. What's this? What are people using it for? What do you hear about it? How do you heat treat it? Or how do you grind it? Or, all of those kind of things. And every time I learn something new, then I want to come back to my shop and start making a knife that uses whatever that is. And it keeps knife making fresh, and it keeps the craft alive in me so that I want to keep doing it. All right, that's how I've managed to keep doing this for 25 years. Take some of that away, take it with a grain of salt, but hopefully if you're doing this, you'll be doing it in another 25 years too. And hey, I hope I will too. I might be dead by then, but I might not. So you never know. hoping for another 25. Again, if you're interested in participating in the viewer knife video, by all means, send me a picture. And again, the more detailed, the more clear, the more well lit it is, the better. All right, guys, thanks for watching and see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. Walter Sorrells Blades.com.